When I was looking at some of the greeter and letter programs, I realized that there were a few things I needed to tell you about the string concat operator, or method rather. And I wanted to talk about that and the difference between that and the plus sign concatenation operator. So when we first started out and we wanted to put together different pieces of information, different strings in a print line, we actually used the plus sign. And that was a simple way to concatenate or join two strings or three strings or however many together in a print line statement. So we can say that one way to concatenate, and concatenate just means join together, pieces of information or strings is with the plus sign. Another way is with the concat method of the string class. So we can join different variables or different strings together if the variables are strings. We can join them together using the concat method of the string class. And I wanted to point a couple things out on that. So one thing I wanted to point out is it used to be that compilers and the Java language itself would not let you put a single apostrophe in a quoted string. This is a string literal. Remember, a literal means I am literally typing between the two quotation marks exactly what I want to appear. So I've got quote the literal I'm sorry to string that I want to appear in my output. In the past, you could not put a single apostrophe in there. It would not compile or would give you an error. And that was because, and there is still the fact that you can declare a char variable, which we're not doing because it's not part of the AP subset. But if I know I have a variable that I only want to hold one letter or number or symbol, rather than allocating and eating up all the memory for a string, I can use a much smaller shortened memory location, manage my memory a little more efficiently, and I can just put in single quotes the one symbol I want stored in memory. And so in the past, it would confuse the compiler if you put a single quote in a string because it said, I don't know what's going on. That's used for declaring char variables. Well, now apparently that's allowed. So you can do it just like this. But if you see a backslash in front of a quote in a string like this, that's going back to the old days where you could not put a single quote in without escaping it. Putting a backslash in front of it, that flagged the compiler, hey, print out this apostrophe literally and don't try to interpret it as part of a char assignment statement. So you may see something like this on the AP exam. That's fine, that's legit, that's allowed. Notice in my output I get the correct output in either case. So I'm just pointing out to you that you may see the escape in front of an apostrophe, harking back to the old days when you could not put the apostrophe in a string quotation. And if you go to the Oracle documentation on escape sequences, it's going to show you slash apostrophe as being what you need to do for an embedded apostrophe, although now we know you don't have to. So I'm pointing that out. The other thing I want to point out is that if you are dealing with strings, you can concatenate using the string concat method and you can nest those. So you can jam a whole bunch of stuff in one line. So here I'm taking a string literal, which is literally hello comma typed in between double quotes. I'm putting dot concat to, because this is a string, I can invoke the concat method on it. And I'm putting the next thing in quotes that I want to show up, Kirk. Then I'm going to concatenate a dot to end the sentence. Then if I want to force another carriage return, I can, to force a blank line here, which is what I've done. And I can put slash n, remember that's the escape sequence for a carriage return or new line, as long as I put it in quotes. I can't I can't take the quotes out because it becomes a string, right, When I put the quotes around it, it's a string of characters, it's an escape sequence, and now I've concatenated it and I've got my blank line that I've forced. So if you were doing, say, letter or greeter, and you were concatenating, but you really wanted to force the stuff onto multiple lines without doing print line statements, you could have concatenated on that /n. So that's one thing I wanted to show you. If I want to do the same thing with the plus operator, instead of using the concat, I literally just put plus, and I put plus quote /n quote to concatenate the new line character on there. Two different ways of concatenating strings that accomplish the same thing. So now what I want to show you is there is a slight difference between using the plus symbol and using the string concat. The string concat method only works with strings. So say I create a string called red shirt, and for some reason I want to put the integer 5 concatenated onto the value that's in red shirt. Well, let me start at the beginning. There's a couple of things going on here. For one, notice I have not set red shirt equal to a value, so it's null. Nulls are bad. That means a total absence of value. So now if I try to concatenate something onto it, I'm going to get a compile error here in main. I can get around that if I do a separate class file, but I'll get the word null printing out when I don't want it to, and I'll try to do another video on that. But if you're in main, and even if you're in a class file, here's the rule you should follow. I'm going to get a compile error in main if that is a null value, if it hasn't been set equal to something and I try to concatenate something onto it. So what I need to do if I'm not sure what is actually going to, when I declare, losing my train of thought here, I'm not sure what I'm going to put in red shirt, so when I declare it and initialize it because I know I'm going to use concat with it, I better make it equal to an empty string. Now it's not null, and the compiler understands it will hold a string of characters. It is just empty. There are no strings in it. That's different than null. Null is total absence of value. That can't be interpreted. The compiler doesn't know, did you mean that to be a string or a char or an int or a double, or what did you mean for that to be? It's a total absence of value. It's a vacuum. It's a void. It's an emptiness. The compiler won't try to interpret that. But if I want to default a string to nothing, but signify that yes, I understand this is a string, there's just no value in it yet, I do it by putting quote quote with no space, nothing in there to signify an empty string. That's similar to me saying int x equals 0. I'm defaulting it to 0. Well, here, the way I default nothingness in a string value is to put quote quote. That's comparable to setting something to nothing in a numeric with a 0. So now I can concatenate on it with no issues, okay? But if I do concat, it's an empty string, and then look, I've just got redshirt.concat, Scotty beam me up. I'm not going to get my output. Notice I get nothing after hello Spock. That's because, remember, I can't just do the concat and assume that it stuck Scotty beam me up into the string. Remember, I have to reassign. Have to do an assignment statement. I put redshirt equals redshirt.concat. So I can't just, you might be tempted to do this and think that, well, that's the concat method, it sticks it on the end. Does not do what you think. You have to say, stick it on the end and rewrite to memory the memory space named redshirt, the new value. So now I'll get Scotty beam me up. So be careful of that. That's an easy mistake to make. Now what if I want to say there are 5 red shirts on the next shuttle? So I might be tempted to say take red shirt, and again I've got to do this whole little step here. Take red shirt and concatenate onto it the integer 5. I cannot do that. With the string concat method, I can only concatenate strings, not ints, not doubles, nothing else, not booleans, etc. Cannot type. I can make 5 a string by putting it in quotes, making it a string literal. I can do that, but I can't just put the integer 5 on there because anything in that concat parameter list there, anything in the parens has to be a string. And you say, well, okay, I get that. What I'm really saying is this. You can't put that there. You can't say, let me take an int variable and put it into the concat. You get the same thing. Cannot do that. However, the plus sign is more forgiving. The plus sign allows you to concatenate the integer on there. It allows you to put that int variable on there. So you see the difference. The concat method of the string class will not accept integers, but the plus sign will. So you've got more flexibility with the plus sign. Also, if I forget to set red shirt equal to anything, if I leave it null, I'm still going to get my initialization error in NetBeans. So other compilers may let that go, and they may just put a 5 instead of Scotty beam me up exclamation point 5. In other compilers, I might actually get a 5 printed out. Some compilers are a little more forgiving on that, and they won't flag that as a possible issue. So again, I'm just showing you that the plus is more flexible than the concat. The concat only works with strings. The concat hates null values. The plus sign in other compilers that I've used will just say, okay, it's null, so that means just ignore the null and then just print out the next thing. Print out the 5 as an example in this one. So just 2 ways to do that, but I wanted to make sure that you understood the difference between the two. Don't think they're completely interchangeable because they're not. Also wanted to show you if I want to default a string to nothing, I do empty string. Now a space is technically a character. So if I put a space here, that's okay, but that's a character. It will print out the space, and that means it's not an empty string. Red shirt equals space is not empty. It's holding a single character, a space, okay? Notice the space printed out because it indented it. So I want you to see the difference between space, which is a legit character, just like an A or a 1, and empty string, quote, quote, meaning make it empty, default it to being empty, not holding anything, similar to a 0 in a numeric. All right, so I've probably told you more than you ever wanted to know about embedding apostrophes, using the concat string method versus using the plus symbol, how to put a new line escape sequence in and fake it out as a string by putting it in quotes, and how the differences occur between the plus sign and the string concat method when you're trying to decide which to use, and how, remember, for strings you got to say red shirt equals redshirt.concat if you want that to print out in the print line. Here it lets me get away with not saying, you know, line equals line.concat hello.concat curt.concat period.concat new line, because in a print line it will do the concat on the fly, but it doesn't reassign anything to value. Okay, so if I want to here in the print line, boy, if I could type, that would be great. In the print line, yes, I can concatenate on the fly and have it print out what I want it to print out, okay? But it has not changed the value of red shirt in memory. Oops. So now I'm going to have nothing printed out. Well, it's going to tell me I've got an error here. But what I want to show you before I run out of time, and I don't have time to fix it, this will print out Scotty beam me up. This would just print out a blank line because I have not changed the value in memory to Scotty beam me up. The memory is still the empty, it holds the empty string, quote, quote, because I didn't put redshirt equals redshirt.concat. So just be aware of all the tricky stuff with strings and plus signs.